All right, it's 1 minute after the hour, and we're going to get rolling. We've got a lot to cover, and we've only got about 30 minutes because if I were you, I wouldn't be spending more than 30 minutes with me. So this is George Spalding. I'm the Executive VP at Pink Elephant, coming to you today from Burlington, Ontario, in East Coast time. So good afternoon, all you folks in the East Coast. Good afternoon, all you folks in the Midwest. But if you're in the northern part of the Midwest, which is where I live, I think you might be getting some snow or had some snow yesterday. And then if you're further west than that, good morning. Good morning, everyone. Okay, so here we go. DevOps best practices. This is a huge topic, and we're only going to talk for about 30 minutes. So obviously, I'm going to do a little picking and choosing, and I'm not going to go into incredible depth in every one of these. So we've got what we list. We have a new course called the DevOps Essentials course, and these 15 are actually the total summation of what we call our second layer of the full stack. These are the essential practices and processes of DevOps, and we go into each one of these in great detail in that course. It takes us almost an entire day just to go through these. So we're only got 30 minutes, so let's get going. So Puppet Labs, which is a vendor organization that's in business to write software and sell software for DevOps, produces a annual event or an annual report called the State of DevOps Report. The 2017 version has a quote in it that says, "Some people, vendors, organizations, peoples or organizations eager to start on the DevOps path begin by researching which tools they should buy. More important than specific tools, though, this comes from a tool vendor, are the technical practices that enable you to achieve the very things that most people turn to DevOps for." What are those things that people turn to DevOps for? Well, they turn to DevOps primarily to make things faster, to get things smoother, to get things better, to improve basically better, faster, cheaper. So in other words, improve quality, deliver value faster, and have it cost less. All of those things is what we're after when we go into the DevOps transformation or embark upon the DevOps journey. So we believe that DevOps leverages really three areas of best practice. The ITIL area, which we'll talk a few of these around here, change management being a biggie. Lean, and as Lean basically is applied to IT, and then Agile. So Lean ITIL has traditionally been an ops framework, and the only area that actually touched dev was actually release management. Lean has primarily been an ops framework, comes from manufacturing, but it turns out that it is a foundational element of Agile, which is primarily a development framework and has grown to become a project management framework. So let's get rolling. So this really comes from Lean, the concept of basically of having an organization that has what we call a true north, that has a true north value, that basically everyone in the IT department and everyone in the business is on board, and they understand that that is the goal, period, end of sentence. That's what we're trying to do. And in our world today, when we're talking DevOps, the goal of ITIL, of Lean, of Agile, of DevOps is to deliver value faster to the customer, to the business. That's it. That is the goal. There's no question of every single one of these frameworks, of every single one of these methodologies, that's where we're headed. So how do we do that? Well, in the world of Lean, we basically we go through a tool or an exercise called Voice of the Customer, which is, first of all, we have to decide who our customer is. Let's just pick an airline for a quick example. So who's the customer on an airline? Well, somebody who flies on the plane. Well, that's nice, but isn't the customer also somebody who flies 100,000 miles a year on a plane versus Joe and Margaret and the two kids who are going to Orlando for spring break? That's really a different customer. They might both fly on planes, but the 100,000-mile flyer is definitely somebody whose value proposition is completely different than Joe and Margaret for spring break. They're after cheap flights. They'll take the 6 a.m. flight if they can save a few $100s, whereas the 100,000-mile flyer is looking for direct flights, looking for no connections, looking for upgrades, looking for extra miles, looking for better food, all of these types of things that are part of the value proposition as opposed to just getting to Orlando cheap. And I fly a great deal, or used to fly a great deal, and my value proposition is real simple. I don't like lines. Whatever I have to do to avoid a line, that's what I'm going to do. I'll accept any pain, and almost I'll spend a good deal of money in order to make sure that I don't have to wait in line. One of the other tools we talk about in the world of lean is something called value stream mapping. So first of all, we need to know what a value stream is. Notice I skipped number 2, and I'm going to skip a lot of numbers because we just don't have lots of time. So a value stream, basically, let's oversimplify this. A value stream is a process. It could be more than one process that are laid end to end. Right, the processes are laid end to end, and then on one side is where we start in the world of IT, or creating whatever it is that we're creating and trying to deliver, and on the other end is the actual customer receiving something in production. Okay, so that's the value stream from the very beginning of where the very first thing where we start, all the way to getting it to the customer in production. There is no value to the customer unless it's actually sitting in their hands and they're working on it. They're working with it, okay? Getting it done but not shipping it and not releasing it is zero value. Let's be clear on that. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take this concept of a value stream or a process, and we're going to put this visually on a wall. So first we need to understand that processes need to flow. So my basic example of a flow process, and it's also called a pull process, and we're going to see some of that later, is the McDonald's drive-through. So the McDonald's drive-through, I can't move my car up till the guy in front of me moves up. And I can't pay until the guy in front of me pays. I can't pick up the food at the window till the guy in front of me does. Well, McDonald's did some pretty clever stuff. They said, where's the big bottleneck? This is about the theory of constraints. Where's the bottleneck in our drive-through? It turns out the bottleneck in the drive-through, the slowest part of the process, because every process has the slowest part, that bottleneck is people, the people ordering, the customers ordering. So what did McDonald's do? Well, in most of the recent McDonald's and some of the ones that are being rebuilt, they have 2 lines to order. So they've doubled their capacity for that specific part of the process. So by doubling that capacity, therefore they remove that constraint, or certainly improve it by doubling it. The other thing they do, of course, is they kick you out of line if you've asked for something weird. They send you they get your money, and then they send you over to the penalty box and say you have to wait for that plain hamburger. I had a kid who only did plain hamburgers. I'm very familiar with the penalty box. So anyway, it flows. That is a simplistic flow for a process. In the world of lean, there's really only 3 kinds of activities. There's value add, which is considered good stuff, which adds value in the eyes of the customer. There's necessary non-value add, which the customer could care less about, but we have to do it. Like recruiting, like accounting, like training, all of the things we would have to do in order to provide these services to the customer, but the customer says, well, that's not value add to me. And then there's non-value add, which is another word for waste. Non-value add, we try and eliminate. Necessary non-value add, we try and minimize. And value add, we try and optimize. That's our goal. So a value stream map looks something like this. Obviously, this is oversimplified. But in other words, there's a bunch of steps in this process / value stream that gets from the beginning all the way to the end. There's a certain amount of time allocated for each step. And it's not so much allocated as we're estimating how long something takes, and then we're measuring how long it actually takes, because that's a key element. But then there's this other thing down here. There's this thing called wait time. Wait time, which basically says, we're not doing anything here. We're just sitting there on our hands, just waiting, doing nothing. So this is something that obviously we consider this waste in the world of lean, and we'd like to get rid of it. Then there's something called lead time, which everyone's familiar with. This is simply how long do I need, if I want it in my hand tomorrow, when did I need to order it? Okay, if I want a new car before Christmas, when did I need to order it if it's being built at the factory? If I want a custom sofa from a furniture store and I'm picking the fabric, how long do I need to order it before I get it? Right? That's lead time. It's that simple. It's from the beginning of the process to the very end of the process when it's actually in the customer's hand being used. That's lead time. Okay? All right. So we want to eliminate waste as much as we possibly can, and then we also want to reduce handoffs. By the way, I've got a chat window open, and I encourage you, if you have questions, please enter them in the chat window. That would be great. I have Rihanna, and she's going to come tell me about all that stuff, which is great. And I'll try and answer those both as we go and also at the end. I'm trying to see whether I could expand. I can't expand my chat window. Okay, so eliminating waste whenever possible and reduce handoffs. So handoffs are by definition an opportunity for error. Okay, when I'm actually handing off. Let's just use one quick example. So we're writing some code and we're writing it in our Seattle office, we'll just say, and then we're sending the code over to India, and they're working on it overnight, my night, their day, in India, and then they're handing it back to me in the morning. Well, okay, so I'm getting these. Will slides be available for download? Yes, they'll be available as a PDF. So now, how are we going to do that? Those are handoffs. Those are opportunities for error. We try and minimize that as much as possible in terms of this. Okay. So in terms of waste, Shigeo Shingo, who's a famous guy when it comes to lean, said the words, the most dangerous kind of waste is the waste that we don't see, that we don't know about. That's the ones that really is the most important. So as bad as waste is, at least if we see it, that's a positive. So here's what lean considers waste. The word is, Japanese word is muda. So we've got transportation, inventory, motion, waiting time, overproduction, overprocessing, defects, and rework, and non-utilized talent. So let's talk about these really quickly. Transportation means moving stuff around. So if I send things back and forth across the ocean, yes, it certainly involves moving. You could say, well, but that doesn't count. It's all electronic. But transportation in general is both can be fraught with errors. It can cost extra money. It can cause delays. All of those types of things. Inventory. Obviously we know what inventory is when it comes to products, but let's talk about IT. So can I have an inventory of changes? Sure, I can have an inventory up front of changes of RFCs that we want to make, and I can have an inventory of changes that are finished being made but aren't released. I can have inventory in both lines of the change management process. I could have it in release management. I could have inventories of incidents. I could have an inventory of problems where I'm not basically able to get to them because I don't have the resources, don't have the time, don't have the money. Motion. This is really, in IT, believe it or not, it's actually an issue. So how are we geographically set up in our organization in terms of talking to each other and communication? Is that working? Or does everything go through email? Could we turn around and talk to somebody we work with? Could we look at their screen easily, or do we have to get up and go to the other end of the room, the other end of the campus, the other end of the world? So motion is an issue. Waiting time is simply waiting and not doing nothing. One of the big waiting times is that I find problematic is approvals. We're basically waiting for approvals. We're doing nothing. It's not moving forward. It should be moving forward. Lean says it should flow. So it should never stop moving. So anytime we have to wait and simply stop, Lean says, bad idea, that's completely wasteful. Overproduction is just making too many, making more than you needed, more than were in demand. Overprocessing means actually making it better than the customer needed it to be, taking extra time, introducing new errors, things like that. Not a good plan. We don't want that. Defects, obviously, are an issue. And what I like to say is, I don't know why, and I've had this conversation for a long time, I don't know why we never have time to do it right, but we always have time to do it over. It doesn't make sense. Non-utilized talent. So now I've got a bunch of experts, gurus, gods in the technical world, but what happens when they're not doing their godlike stuff? Are they just sitting on their hands? Am I basically paying for an expert, but I'm only using them 2 days a week? What happens in terms of that? That's another form of waste. Another way of looking at lean is through the other Japanese words, Mira and Marie. So Mira is simply variation. If we want flow to happen constantly and move across left to right from dev to ops or from basically work to value, I would like that to be smooth and level and flat, but it's not that way. So I might have different customer demand. So that's actually a form of waste that we need to deal with and plan around, things like that. And then there's Marie, which is overburdening or inflexibility. So overburdening is pretty simple. I just dump things on you. I give you more work than you could possibly accomplish. Poof, I'm overburdening you. You get tired, you make mistakes, you start to get burned out. Inflexibility is what I call policy-enforced waste. Policy-enforced waste, where I basically have this ridiculous approval mechanism which basically forces people to jump through a ridiculous, I've seen 7, 8, 9 hoops in order to get something approved when anyone could have said yes and we could have moved forward. We're just wasting time. Okay, sorry, I hit it twice, kind of. So this is what we call visual management, which means we'd like to see things. We'd like to see them up on the wall. So in this case, what we've given you is a Kanban board. That's what we call this. Kanban is a Japanese word for billboard. So a Kanban board says this. It says, we're going to show you the value stream. We're going to show you the work in progress. And it's going to introduce an interesting concept into what we talk about in the world of IT, which is capacity for steps within a process. We're going to say this step in the process, doesn't matter what the label is 3. I can work on 3 things at once. This one's 4, this one's 3, this one's 3. And we're pre-selecting out of the prioritized list, we're pre-selecting 3 right here. So therefore, how this is going to work is we're going to move forward. It turns out that this step can work on 3 at a time. It's working on 2. It's going to grab this one off the top, move it down there. This one can work on 4 at a time. It's only working on 3. Going to reach over and pull this one down here and start working on that one. This can only work on 3 at a time, but it's already working on 3. Nothing to pull there. Nothing in the done column. Now this one can work on 3 at a time, but it's only working on 1 because there's nothing for it to pull from the done column over here. So this, my friends, is a bottleneck. This is the constraint in this particular process, and we can see it. We can see it from across the room. Can't read a single word that's on here, but because there's a great big white column, it's a bottleneck, because there shouldn't be any empty columns. There should always be something moving along. It should flow. That's what visual management is about, and that's what we're after. We want this to be a transparent exercise. So, working in small batches and using Agile project management and Scrum in order to make that happen. So traditional waterfall project management looks like this. It's basically there's one opportunity to define the scope, which is up front during the requirements phase, and then once that's done, then that's the plan, then we design it from there, and we build the design, and then we test the build, and then we implement it, and poof, there it is, and we hope that that's exactly what everybody wanted when the scope was set 8 months ago or 2 years ago. As opposed to, remember, one chance to adjust the scope in this waterfall method. Okay, so in Agile project management, Agile is an iterative process. So when we talk about iterative, we're talking about the fact that we come up with a finished product every 2 to 4 weeks. We come up with a finished product, and we define the scope once, and we come up with the product 4 weeks later, and we ask the customer, how do you like it? And the customer says, well, I don't like that. I need you to change this, this, and this. No problem. We redefine the scope, we do it again. And we give it back to them, say, how do you like this one? Oh, well, I don't like that one, but it's better. You're on the right track, so let's redefine the scope, do it again. Redefine the scope, do it again. Redefine the scope, do it again. If I'm not happy with this one, which is worth millions of dollars, I would have another one. And we do it again. until the customer basically was happy. Could the customer have been happy here? Sure. Maybe the customer was just thrilled with number 3. And they said, yeah, great, that's exactly what I was looking for, or that's enough. That's enough, the minimum viable product. That's perfect. That's all I need. I'll be back to you later if it's something else, but for now, that's good enough. So Agile project management, the most important thing it does is it gives us the chance to continually adjust and readjust and basically give the customer exactly what they want, as opposed to having what we call in the world of Waterfall scope creep. And we don't like scope creep because we're taking something that was supposed to be set in stone and changing it in the middle. So here we plan on changing it in the middle. That's part of reality. It's part of life. So change management, how does that work in this world of DevOps? Well, here's a traditional ITIL change approval process that you probably have seen before. So we've got a request for change, which goes to the change manager, and if the change manager wants to, they can authorize some minor changes. They could have a CAB board they would authorize, then it goes to for scheduling to the change manager. Maybe we have a management board if something's extra giant. But then we have this little baby over here, which is what most people view as the savior of change management, which is pre-approved standard changes. So if we can have pre-approved standard changes, that's what we're really after, because that removes all the bureaucracy, all the delay, and everything else. So how does something get to be a pre-approved change? Well, in the ITIL world, it gets to be pre-approved by going through the normal change process. So, but in the DevOps world, there's a little bit different stuff, but we don't have time to go in too much depth. But here's what I want you to see. Here's what I believe would be the normal setup on the before, right? Most changes would be here in the normal complex change area that would go to a CAB and have to be decided on in a meeting and things like that. And then you'd have only 10% and then some minor changes and maybe some urgent changes. But in a DevOps world, I believe that we're talking 70, 80% of the changes would be pre-approved. Therefore, they wouldn't have to go to a meeting. They wouldn't have to be delayed. There's no conversation. There might be some minor changes that have to be dealt with. There's, maybe some still some normal changes, especially infrastructure changes that have to be dealt with. Number of urgent changes hopefully will go down. But the point is that this standard pre-approved change concept, this is what we're after. And that is actually really, when you think about it, that's what DevOps is looking for, is what's called self-service changes, the ability for dev to actually make changes and introduce them, release them into the infrastructure, really without having to go through the change management cycle. Okay, last but not least, and I can deal with some questions after that, is to talk about continual service improvement. Now, my coworker and friend, Garrett Case, and I were the co-authors of the ITIL v3 Continual Service Improvement volume. But when we now apply that into this world that we're operating in, we can talk about Kaizen. So Kaizen is the Japanese word for change for the better. And Kaizen is also really a mindset. It's an improvement mindset, a way of thinking about and looking at the world, if you will, with your mind towards always pursuing perfection, always going for perfection, and therefore there's always room for improvement. There's no such thing really as good enough. We're talking about improvement as a way of life, improvement in what I like to call the DNA or the fabric of the organization. So we're always thinking about ways to improve, always thinking about ways to get better. And in the world of Lean, we use the DMAIC cycle, which comes out of Six Sigma. And so it comes out of Six Sigma. The stands for Define, Measure, Analyze, Improve, Control. There's another cycle in Six Sigma called DMADV, but it's not important. What's important is this is the cycle we use to improve existing processes. So we define, and you spend a good deal of time defining the problem, defining the issue. There was a great quote from Albert Einstein. If I only had an hour to save the world, I would spend the first 55 minutes figuring out what was the issue before I started trying to do it. Measuring, basically gathering data, and hopefully in an automated way. We have to have a lot of data before we work on it. Then we analyze it. After we analyze it, now what Lean even says is, look, kids, if you get to this point and you know what needs to be done, do it. Don't wait. Don't go through this improve cycle. Don't go through this control. Just do it. If you know it really needs to be done, then go ahead and do it. Don't waste time on this. Okay, then you go through and improve, where you actually implement the changes, and then you work up control and measurement again to see if there's been actual improvement. So in the continual service improvement cycle, I need to basically know kind of a direction, kind of a true north, where we headed. Then I need to know where we are. I need to know, given that's where I'm supposed to be, but where am I now? And then I need to figure out what the steps are, what the individual steps are to get me from point A to point B, and then point B to point C to point D, right? And then figuring out how to get there, that's the little tougher part, and that's going to be all these types of improvement, processes improvement, service improvements, visual management. Those are the kinds of things. And then I have to measure it again to see that I actually got there. These are all great. That's great. Let's say I did. Let's say I got there. Wow, that's super. I met my goal. I met my target. Now for the hard part. I need to keep this up. Because remember, this is forever. This is in the DNA. How do I keep the momentum going? Once I achieve whatever target I was trying to achieve, how do I get the momentum going? How do I keep it going? Because it's easy to have a big bang. The problem is, day after day, month after month, year after year, how do I motivate people in order to make this work? That's the dilemma. So, obviously I didn't talk about all 15 of these, but I was able to pick out, I don't know, 5 or 6 that I felt were key to this conversation. I'd be happy and anxious to answer any questions that you might enter in the chat. Yes, the slides will be available. They will be PDF'd, and they'll be made available on the website. I'm sure you'll get an email shortly offering those to you. Are there any other questions about anything we talked about today? Happy to respond. This is me watching the chat right this very second. Feel free to just go in the chat and type a message. You can make it public. You can make it to everybody. You can make it just to me. Doesn't matter. I'll get it either way. No questions so far. There we go. I missed the first few slides. Didn't catch what's new and different with DevOps. Fantastic way to distill so many concepts into a single summary of relevance to DevOps. Thank you very much. It is, DevOps is a big topic. It's a very big topic, and especially when it involves 3 complete methodologies that we already know about, where we're talking about ITIL, we're talking about Lean, we're talking about Agile. It's a big topic, and it leads to what we're calling at Pink something called integrated service management, which basically is an even bigger topic than just DevOps. Can you give examples of a normal change which would become standard in a DevOps model? Sure, releasing new code. That would become a standard change in a DevOps model. And the way you're going to do that, and because I don't have time to go into it in depth, but the way you're going to do it is you're going to basically say, look, enough of this release criteria ops. I'm not going to sit there and jump through hoops. You basically set up your infrastructure in such a way so that I have an API which I can go through and I can install things into the infrastructure. I can actually release into the infrastructure through an API. Self-service releasing. That's what we're after, self-service releasing. That would become one of those normal changes, which in today's world would obviously go through the change process and a CAB and the decision making. The change process becomes the most important thing. One of the things it does in ITIL is it's a traffic cop to try and make sure that there's some sort of a stop before we go into production. That's similar in the world of DevOps, because if we could have every single one of them, we could have all the different product teams, et cetera, releasing at the same time. That might not be a good idea in the world of DevOps. Let's see, service asset management. Well, the concept of service asset management / configuration management, the focus I work on in terms of DevOps is you need configuration management even in the world of automated deployment. You need it because you actually want to automate this configuration. You want to be able to do a one-click cloud deployment of a given box. How are you going to do that if you don't have a rock solid written down configuration? How's that going to work? So we need to, if I really want to get into the world of automated deployment, which is what DevOps, that's kind of the ultimate maturity in DevOps, is automated deployment. So if I want to get into that, then I'm going to need pretty heavy duty asset management / configuration management. Hey, it's 1:31. I'm at my 30 minutes because I started at 1 minute after the hour. I need to wrap this up. I thank everybody for coming on board. Thanks for giving me 30 minutes of your lunchtime, perhaps. I appreciate it. We'll talk to you again. George Spalding from Pink Elephant, signing off.